Our public spaces are shaped by art and design. Art turns public spaces into local destinations, as well as opens up invitations for community debate over how shared public spaces are used and who has the right to reconceptualize what they could be. I am Johanna Taylor. I'm the program director of the master's program in creative enterprise and cultural leadership at Arizona State University. We affectionately call this program CECL. Today, I'm joined by a recent CECL graduate, Sophia Donta, who also works as public art specialist at the city of Tempe, and we'll be talking about art and public space. Hi, Sophia. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled to have you here today just because based on your professional experience as well as the work you did in the master's program are really deeply rooted in rethinking through the role of art in shaping public space. I'd love to know a little bit more about your thoughts about this topic based on the applied project that you completed as a culmination of your master's experience. What is some of your thinking that came out about art and public space from this project? And what ideas are you carrying forward into your future work in this field?
Yeah, it's been let's say it's been quite the learning experience and curve, I think, for everyone. Not only working in the field of art and public space, but public health and civic life. And I mean, we've all had to put our most creative brains together and figure out how to adapt and relearn and rethink of how we're using spaces and um, how to be in them in a way that is safe, that means that we can reconnect still, that we can still make a life in a way. And I think arts and culture don't fall short in terms of adaptability. You know, we've had to um, figure out all the ways of still producing, still sharing, still creating spaces for people to enjoy and to learn and to use the arts and culture still as a catalyst. So during the project, my applied project is very interested in public space and alternative spaces and kind of breaking apart of what it means to not only do public art, but also what it means to produce work that is away from sort of like traditional um, museums and galleries and whatnot. So I think it's been super evident in this past few months and whole year really, how we really need to reinvent and push forward not only museums and art making and art sharing and enterprise and creative fields and like everything from very commercial to non-for-profit to social. Um, and I think that's one of the things that I need to, like, that just came up, and they're like the main things that for my project that came up that I want to keep thinking about. And it's this being ready to readapt and to grow and to be flexible, to think about public space and public life, not only from like a accessibility kind of conversation, but also in a public health matter. It's an urgent matter.
Yeah, public health is definitely an urgent matter. And I think that some of the ideas that you've hit on really show how art can really help public health from a community well-being and creating safe spaces to gather, and that really showing how our interpersonal connection and ability to connect with new people and share experiences is really an integral part to what is our complete public health beyond just your annual doctor checkup, but really what's your mental state like on a day-to-day basis. And that really then art and thinking about how art brings people together in public space can really play a role in that.
Definitely, like, and that this whole field hasn't stopped. You know, artists have kept pushing, and I mean, they've been the bearers of a lot of, like, not only distraction, but just a little bit of solace. You know, like immediately there was digital content available as soon as we had a lockdown, and like different cities had different levels of lockdowns and experiences, but um, you know, artists and culture bearers were definitely like on the front lines with others in a completely different. And when I say front lines, I want to make sure I'm acknowledging that I'm not talking about, you know, the frontliners of health and sanitation, but also like the social aspect, the mental aspect, the social fabric of a moment that has brought a lot of challenge and a lot of highlights into deep systemic issues and into personal issues that need to be dealt with. So it really does feel necessary. Like another thing that definitely came up in my project is this necessity to keep exploring the ways that we can incorporate and connect arts and culture into different sectors of life and public life, really, and civic life, and the importance of having that symbiotic kind of connection to keep building relationships that can build towards a better future without sounding cliche or whatever, but truly to think about how can we have an artist in a planning and public health conversation that is going to bring an idea and creation and creativity into like tackling an issue that it's like of pressing matter.
Yeah, I definitely think we saw this year, like you mentioned. We had artists who were immediately pivoting towards shifting their socially engaged art practice to creating community response centers and making their art practice the practice of mutual aid and community building through food sharing networks and being there to support day-to-day needs. And also the way the city of Minneapolis was immediately able to pivot and create these emergency response funds that used city money to send artists directly into the streets to support the work that they were going to do anyway, but also to support city money behind it, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
Were there any methods that you saw come up this year that you want us to carry forward in terms of our post-pandemic existence?
In terms of readaptation to public life.
Yeah, readaptation to public life, like some of the things that we've seen in terms of art and public space. Are there any of these concepts that you think are that are relevant, or things that we should continue to center as we move forward?
I mean, there's so many cool just there's so many cool solutions that have come up in terms of like, okay, well, we're gonna put a chalk circle in grass. I was just looking earlier at a checkerboard kind of grass cutting to safely create distance, like
Yeah.
creative solutions that have come up in terms of like how do we in places like, for example, like New York, where you have a very, very narrow street, and like, how can you walk without being so far away from each other? How can we rethink? Do we like close down parking spots, or do we reuse parking lots? Do we, shut down the car usage to make it more available for walking, for bicycles, where you don't have the need to walk into a facility, like to do more public marketing, you have the need to go into an indoor kind of space, and those are all related to, and I bring them up because they're infrastructure and they're transportation, but they're so ingrained in like what we think about when we think about public art too. Is like there is a lot of built works in terms of infrastructure, and they're like long term, maybe capital improvement or what have you, but also like temporary solutions that can be very much so needed into like what we can do in public art. That's for like an immediate solution kind of aspect, and then we've seen too this whole issue with controversy with monuments and like who are we celebrating in our public spaces? Who are the public spaces for? Who are we thinking that the spaces um, that we that we have accessible? How can we make them more accessible for people that maybe don't necessarily feel safe? Because public space, I mean, it can sound beautiful, and like I just gave you like, we talked about the pretty little things about solutions, but there is realities to public space that are very, very, they're just raw. They're just the way they are. Like it's not necessarily a safe space. We saw it. I mean, we've seen it nonstop. Like when we go protest, when we go be vocal about civic issues, like there is a lot of hostility and there's a lot of violence that needs to be addressed, and like how we think about that, it's important too. And I think public art can address that in a way that is not necessarily just putting a sculpture and a story, or just putting a memorial that idealizes something that maybe people are not happy with.
I think what you're highlighting really brings out how this idea of public space can be a sort of democratic ideal. Like we think that it is accessible to all people, but is it really? And that we're seeing that this is an opportunity to question who has the right to shape public space and to be a part of the audience or participants for whom can engage in that space. So I think you're really, that's a critical concept, especially if we're thinking about how do we reclaim streetways, like, which I think, like, in a place like Phoenix where we are, where there's so many streetways, it's almost like it's the opposite of New York, but it's even more of an opportunity. Like, do we need all these streets? What else is possible?
Yeah, and like it's important that we think about like how can we keep putting pressure as individuals and as users of public space into not only government and I mean I do work for a city, so it's like on the internal side of things, it's there is efforts that are done internal, but also like as users when you're not like as a non city, you know, and an artist, is important to see also like the importance of doing that push and reclaiming and like re and I keep using the re because it's like there's conversations that have been in place already and things that have been done, but we do need to, it's like deconstruct, you know, and use what we have already. Like it's not about like a complete reform transformation with nothing. It's, you know, building out of nowhere. Like yes, we can do that,
Mhm.
but it's also how we use what we have and how we use the practices that we have to keep pushing forward. That, you know, like it's the initiative from a city to put efforts into the already built public art and the already installed public art to be like, hey, we have all of this, please take a mask, bring sanitizer, and go take a
Mhm.
share. Look at the public art that the city has been working. Like our office didn't slow down. For example, in public art with the city of Tempe, we were nonstop the whole year,
You probably
which
set up, right? You have to respond and pivot and try to readjust, all the while finishing a master's program, right? You have a lot going on this year.
was challenging. It was great.
So I think it's also interesting because you're talking about the role of artists in terms of reshaping what's possible in this space. And you yourself are an artist as well as an arts administrator. What is the role of being an artist within working in city government and doing this type of work mean? And how did some of the learning, so both your learning as an artist as well as perhaps what you gained from the CECL graduate program, how does that contribute to the work that you're doing?
Hmm. I think there's different levels of the relation there. It's for me it has been super important to have the knowledge of a practicing artist and a trained artist academically and also like in my own, you know, my own extent, even though if taking hiatus or not, whatever, my creative mind is my creative mind, right? But um it's just useful to, I mean, we're doing work, especially arts administrator in the public sector, for a government agency. It's a I'm going in with being it's easier for me to be a sorry, let me just kind of rephrase a little bit. It's just easier to be a liaison and to be a communicator
Mhm.
of this, like translate, it's learning all the time and doing a lot of translation work in terms of like, you know, this is a creative brain and this is how we work and this is like this whole process that goes in here and then goes in your hands and how you think as a creative artist and as an artist, as a creative producer. And then you have the administrative side of that, which is how do we make it happen.
Mhm.
So that's been super it's been really great to learn to put it in practice every single day because it's not only doing that for the artist in terms of like this is how municipality works and this is how we do it and this is how like the procurement works, but this is also what you have to think. You have to think about all the other partners that are involved. You have to think about the people. It's like your work surrenders in a way to the public space that maybe your studio work doesn't. Um, and then the second way is a translation from the people that are helping us realize these public artworks is, you know, it's a planner and it's the construction team. It's like, how do you translate this idea from an artist to a person that not that they have sensitivity, but they're not trained. They're not maybe not necessarily visually trained as an artist to think about the concept and the idea behind. It's more about, okay, can we build a concrete base so this can stand and not be a hazard? So it's really interesting to have that on a continuous basis. And
I think that word that you're using of translator is really crucial here because it's showing your hybridity in terms of your experiences and as administration, as well as being an artist, as well as gaining all of these other skills from an academic perspective. And it really is that your ability to connect the different players and to be able to see possible ways forward, which is really crucial. And I think that really underscores who you are as a creative leader, as a person working in the arts who can really help to shape what the future of this field is, which I think is really exciting. I think I'm really curious to see the work that you do next, moving forward from ASU.
I'm very excited too. And thank you for that compliment at the end.
Well, it's been an honor to get to know you over your time at ASU, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us today. So thanks for joining this conversation.
Thank you for having me.